Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens. We've very much been looking forward to welcoming our guest, Jordan Belfort, to the show today. It would be tough to beat Jordan's life story for its extreme highs and devastating lows. He's had a lot of success, at one time making over $50 million a year as the owner of the Stratton Oakmont stock brokerage firm. And he's also made a lot of mistakes along the way, which he openly talks about.
In 1999, Jordan pleaded guilty to securities fraud and money laundering and ended up serving 22 months in prison. He was portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, which was based on his autobiography of the same name. Jordan is a great example of someone who's reinvented himself after a fall from grace, and he works to help others avoid the traps he fell into. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Tell us about the misconceptions that you think people might have about you.
Okay, there's different sets of them. I think on some level, I think some women think that I'm a misogynist, which is the absolute opposite of what I am. I mean, if there's any person that loves women and respects women, especially in the workplace, it's me. And I get that from my mom, who was blazing the trail in the 50s when most women weren't in the workplace. My mom was a CPA working in Manhattan back in the Mad Men days. And wow, if 1/10 of what I saw on that TV show was true of the 50s, my mom was one brave lady. But she's brilliant. And then she became the oldest lawyer to pass the bar, the New York State Bar, which she was in the late 70s, became pro bono lawyer of the year in her 80s for doing charity work. My point is that I grew up with this idea that I didn't distinguish men and women. They're supposed to both be super successful in the workplace. And then in terms of love, I no doubt under the influence of drugs, I did insane things. But as a human being, and, with my current wife would be the first to attest, I mean, that bothers me, but, it's not true. And I could see why other people might think that because the way the movie's portrayed. But I think that if they look past sort of some of that false bravado in my younger days, they'd probably see there was a man in pain that was insecure, and they might have a bit more empathy for me.
Drugs were a big part of your life, as you just mentioned, and I'm wondering if you feel like you could have been a sober success story.
Listen, I made some really stupid decisions on drugs, like smuggling money to Switzerland. I would not have done that as a sober man. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to blame the mistakes I made on a drug addiction, because that's a cop-out. I made I made those because I was greedy, I was young, I was foolish, and I had my values wrong. And because of that, most people, you go and try to hit your values. Your beliefs are based on your values. The way you go about living your life is based on your values. If your highest value is, I want to make as much money as possible, that's not going to always lead to the most healthy decision. So the drugs were more of the way I was dealt with the guilt and really allowed me to continue on a path longer than I would have.
What made that value system finally change?
I think it was already changing when I was finally indicted and had to go to jail. So, I think that for me, and I can only speak for myself because everyone is different, but for me, I was brought up really, really well. Like as I said, my mom and my dad, the same thing. They were really just very righteous people, law-abiding, never did anything that was even a hint of crossing the line, right? I was raised to do the right thing. And I think what happened is that my insecurities and, I went into my adulthood, with some holes, and I think a lot of people do. And I felt that if I got rich, that I'd feel good. Those holes would vanish. I didn't know they were holes. I thought it was just because I'm not happy because I don't have enough money yet, right? Mm-hmm. And when I finally got so rich and those holes were still there, you're like, oh my God, wait a second. I thought once I got rich, I'd feel great. So what happened then was I went on this sort of the panic sets in, right? Why am I bringing this up? Well, because when I actually did change my values back in my late 30s, and I got in trouble, went to jail, and at first when I got sober, it wasn't like I had to change into something that never worked. I had to go back to person I was being raised. I was raised to do the right thing. So it wasn't very difficult for me to go back and sort of realign my values so they were more sustainable success. You get it? The number one value today is delivering value to people. I would never do anything where I'm getting more money than I was giving in return. You get it? I would just never do it because that's my highest value.
Tell us more about how that whole prison experience changed you.
It wasn't the prison itself. Like I went to this terrible place and the violence. It wasn't like that at all. prison for me was about separation from my children who I loved so much. That was like this just axe through every emotion I had was my children, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, having to think all the time, to think about people who had lost money, although frankly, the people who were very wealthy, I'm not saying what I did was right, but that wasn't what was killing me inside, that the people who lost money, because the people were very wealthy and I think most of them had paid back. It was really just this idea that I had developed a system for training salespeople. And it was interesting what the judge said. When the judge sentenced me, he said, you know, people talk about victims and victims. He said, yeah, whatever. But the point is, you got all these young kids and you showed them a way of making money and you didn't really honor that. And it was a really good point the judge brought out. What about all these kids? You could have really taken the skills you had and showed them this amazing thing. Instead, I showed them how to become expert salespeople. It didn't really show them the ethics and integrity. And, and that really hung on me as well. When I was in jail, I was fortunate that I was bunking with Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. He's great, Tommy. I love him. So Tommy got me to start writing. And then once I started writing my book that was turned into a movie, that was like almost like this intense form of therapy where I got to see the mistakes I made. A lot of the book, I'm sitting there like narrating my own insane thoughts and my rationalizations. And I was very honest. I was brutally honest with what I've done and how I justified it. And I think by doing that, it allowed me to have a level of understanding about myself that I could have never had otherwise. It would have taken probably 10 years of psychoanalysis. I was able to cram it into this 1 year of intensive writing. And I emerged from that experience feeling like I truly understood myself so much more. And I knew in my heart that under no circumstances, there was no shot I would ever get in trouble. I knew it. You know, I knew it. I knew before that, but it was like the end point. Like I was like, wow, like I really kind of got myself. I understand where I need to be, what I need to do.
What was the reaction of your friends and family when they first read the book?
Well, you know, my mom, believe it or not, who's this, you know, woman my mother has never cursed in her whole life.
Wow.
No, I swear to God, never cursed. She's never had a drink of alcohol in her whole life. My mother's one of these people that she annoyed me so much. It's like, it's got to be an act. It's got to be an act. And you know what? She's acting for 86 years. So I got to say, probably just, you know, someone could act for that long.
Nobody's that good of an actor.
I guess people say to me when I first got out of jail, they're like, oh, he's just he watch what'll happen. Well, you know what? I'm active for 12 years now. Okay. So eventually you got to say, well, that's how we act 12 years straight. And that's who he is. Right. But my mom's the perfect example of that. But yet she loved the book. And she actually helped me. She proofread the book. My mother's a brilliant woman. So she helped me, she was proofreading it, and she was helping me with some funny stories there. Like, you know, she remembered one of the scenes when I fell in love with a stripper, and I called her, and I said, Mom, I'm marrying Blaze. And I forgot that. I just remember calling her after I was getting it before I went to rehab. It's like the day before I got sober. Called my mom after doing like 84 grams of blow and 20 Quaaludes and, you know, another 20 drugs because I just liked the way they sounded. I was in a strip club and I was still married to my second wife. And I'm like, Mom, I'm getting divorced. I'm marrying Blaze. Hold on. I put the stripper on the phone, you know, while the stripper is literally, you know, committing a sexual act on me. And I had forgotten that. Like, all I remember was that I called her and said, I'm getting a divorce. And she was great. I'll tell you one thing about my parents is that the gift they gave me was one of non-judgment. That they as much as they disagreed with how I was living my life, they accepted me. They didn't like it. They would tell me, but when I got in trouble, they stood behind me, and I always knew they loved me. And that, I think, was such an instrumental part of my ability to really recover emotionally. I think when your parents give you unconditional love like that, it's just such a huge thing.
How much of the movie is really what happened in real life? How closely does it follow what your real life experience was? Because you watch the movie and you think, how is Jordan even still alive after all this?
Jordan's alive because his liver is very lucky. Listen, you know, the human body is this amazing thing. It can recover from complete and brutal self-attack until you go over the line. You get it? Like, there's either over the line or before the line. As long as you don't cross over, for whatever reason, I got lucky. All right. I think one reason was I didn't drink alcohol. And alcohol has the ability to intend a lot of other drugs you take. You get it? So what happens is when you're not taking alcohol, you can manage your dosages of hard drugs a lot more effectively because you know what your dosages are, you know your tolerance. But if you drink alcohol, it throws everything out of whack. And also alcohol does a lot of damage to your liver. So I never damaged my liver. I still have the liver of a 12-year-old, I think, believe it or not. And so I was able to come back like completely and fully from that. And, I haven't done drugs. It's been over 22 years now. So it was April 17th, 1997. Now, I still drink. So, I'll drink one sip of a shot and then I won't finish it. So it was the drugs. So I got very lucky like that. And I guess by the grace of God, I mean, honestly, I really believe that. I believe that God had a bigger plan for me because better men than me were taken out by less drugs, like Heath Ledger. You hear so many people that, you take one hot dose and it's over. So as long as you don't take that hot dose, you can come back. I mean, I was in bad shape at the end, but your body rejuvenates. Mm-hmm. Now I respect my body. I just did hot yoga today. I eat right. I'm trying. I'm searching for the fountain of middle age right now.
One of the things we talked about when we were on your show was depression and how I've suffered with depression.
Awesome,
oh, thank you so much. We had the best time being on your show. And I was wondering, what kind of advice do you have for people who might be suffering from a mental illness themselves? And what can they do if they feel ashamed of their illness and don't really want to tell anybody and are kind of silently suffering?
I would start off by saying, number one, I think I told you that I didn't suffer from really depression. I mean, I tried all the antidepressants because I had to try every drug when it came out. I felt obligated. Mm-hmm. So I tried everything. Prozac still. You know, I like the way they sounded, so I tried them. But here's the thing, and I'll make a joke about it. But, I suffered from debilitating anxiety, which is sort of like, depression's sort of cousin, distant or close second cousin. Mm-hmm. Time I was 10 years old, or 8 or 9, I had terrible night terrors, which then became, we didn't call them panic attacks back then. It was in the late 60s, early 70s. So, we called them night terrors, or they really didn't even have a label back then. So they were not called panic attacks. I didn't find out that they were panic attacks until I was in my late teens, early 20s, and they started coming back again, So it was terrible. It was really terrible. And to this day, I've never fully recovered. I don't know if I ever will. I trained myself to fight sleep because I was scared to fall asleep at night because I had these terrible anxiety only at nighttime. I lived with it my whole life, and I finally got a handle on it, though the symptoms abated finally after I got sober when I was 37 years old, about then, right? When I finally got sober, I had one panic attack, and then I called my sponsor, who was a sage, older guy, and we talked, and I came to this realization that there was simply no way under the sun that I would ever put a drug in my mouth again. So I had no choice but to live with this panic attack. So either I was going to conquer it or it was going to conquer me. Now, let me say this, okay? Depression is real. You can't talk your way out of depression. At least that's my belief. I think there's some people that would think that when you're depressed, there's a chemical element to depression. There's a genetic component to depression. And you just can't think your way out of it. You can't talk your way out of it. I think it's a really serious problem in not just America, but in the world. And I think that there's absolutely, positively nothing to be ashamed about because you know what? I think 75% or 80% of the world has been depressed. And I don't mean just sad. I mean depressed at one point in their life. I think the stigma that used to exist around depression has been almost completely removed. And over the next decade, I think it will be completely removed. And there's so many effective treatments right now. At the end of the day, while I'm not this big proponent of using drugs, I think that sometimes drugs are very important. In depression, the newer drugs are the older drugs were much heavier and they had lots of side effects. In the early days, it was like tricyclic antidepressants like Elavil and Pamelor, and you would gain weight and you would be dry mouthed. And it's something they were really not that laser guide. The new drugs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the norepinephrine drugs, they're much more targeted to the brain's receptors. So you can really get relief like that without having the debilitating effects that cause people to not be able to live on them for the long term or live on them and have terror and not feel good, feel sluggish. So I think a lot of the stigma is associated from that time in the 80s and the early 90s when the older generations really, you didn't have many doctors and psychiatrists didn't have a lot of tools in the arsenal to go after them, and people were just depressed. So now you have even things like, run electric currents and magnetism. So I really think that if you have depression, there's absolutely nothing to be embarrassed. And I think you should seek out the best professional help. I think you should a combination of most people, I think medication, at least for a short time, along with the right type of talk therapy. I think those two combined is life-saving and life-changing, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And I can't wait for the day when nobody has to feel that way because it's a terrible thing, and it's real, and it can destroy someone's life if it goes untreated.
What advice do you have for somebody who has had a fall from grace like you did? I mean, how did you reemerge and come back and start a new day?
let me just tell you my take on this, is that I believe that there is tremendous power in failure. I really do. And I think that when you fail, when you really hit bottom, I think the problem with a lot of people is they don't allow themselves to hit bottom. And they live in this sort of purgatory, this level not quite of bottoming out, but they're like sort of like in this sort of slow slog where they're barely scraping by. But unless you're feeling that massive pain of hitting bottom, you don't really have that impetus to change.
Right.
So like what happens is like, for me, when you hit that real bottom, it's like that's so negative. It's almost like a rubber band that's being stretched. And there's power, there's stored energy in that rubber band when it's being stretched. So if you can flip that ultra negativity and flip that, when you do bounce back, you can make this mass bounce back that would seem almost like it's preternatural. It's like this wild comeback. So that requires like allowing yourself to really hit bottom, like not trying to hold on. And so many people, like, they won't admit it. Like, they try to hold on to some semblance of that they didn't really fail. You have to, like, when it's over, it's over. You got to let yourself go, let yourself hit that bottom. And then also you got to be willing. There's two things. There's massive hard work involved. And also you have to learn the rules of the game of success. There's knowledge, there's specialized skills you got to learn. And if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to, like, there's the inner game of success, what's up in your mindset, right? And then the outer game. So as long as you're willing to learn the skills required for success, things like, rules of entrepreneurship, how to sell and persuade, how to market. If you know some basic stuff and you're willing to really work your tail off, I am telling you, there's absolutely no way that anyone can't come back from failure.
You say that when you're selling something, you have to be a great storyteller. And I'm wondering where you learned that skill and how can the average person learn that from you?
I wouldn't say you have to be a great storyteller, but some people are so bad at it. It's like the best example is, the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I love that movie, right?
Right. Oh, one of my favorites.
We love it.
Teacher Ben Stein, and he's so funny. And he plays the keys being all monotone. All right, class, open up your books. And all the kids are drooling in there. One kid's like, looks like he's about to eat the tea, right? And we laugh when we see that because we know that's what really poor tonality and poor communication skills sounds like and looks like, and then those reactions of what it feels like to be on the other end of it.
Yeah.
So that's one end of the spectrum, this terrible, almost cliche, terrible ability to communicate, tell a story, and get your point across. Then on the other end, the other end of the spectrum, I'm there, where I really have this ability to tell an amazing story and use tonalities and body language, right? That's the other end. But there's all these levels in the middle. Now, what I'm saying is that you don't have to become an expert, but what you have to be is good enough. Good enough so you can get people to at least keep listening to you, so you can get your point across. And hopefully with that point, obviously, if it's in a business setting or, there's a goal you have in mind, that they listen long enough and hard enough that you can frame your point and get it across to someone else, both logically and emotionally. Now, for that, I teach a system of sales and influence called straight line persuasion. And it's very effective. It works really well, and it helps people become proficient at that. So there is certainly a way to do it. My system, I think, is by far the most effective one out there. Part of that is telling stories. And I think that, one of the issues is that people who are not in sales professionally, like so-called civilians, they don't realize how important it is that they learn how to influence and persuade, not just the salespeople. And I think the better way to look at it is to say, let's lose sales and persuasion. Let's call it communication. Mm-hmm. You need to learn to effectively communicate, whether you're a salesperson or not.
How do you feel about setting goals? I mean, how important is that to you? As if you're selling something or if you're reinventing yourself, how important is it to you to sit down and say, okay, these are my goals. This is what I want to achieve?
You need to have a vision for your future that's above your goals. Like, goals are temporary. Goals have beginning points and they have end points. And goals are not meant to be something that you're emotionally attached to. We set goals and we very often don't achieve them. And that's okay, actually. In other words, your goals are the short-term and intermediate-term targets that you're aiming for. Whether you hit them or not is really not all that relevant, because if you're setting your goals correctly, you're stretching yourself. You're actually setting goals above your comfort zone, above where you think you could hit. You're stretching to achieve them. What your goals are there to tell you is if you're heading in the right direction or the wrong direction towards your vision, which is up like 3 years in the future, and your goals connect to your vision, like these signposts along the way that connect to your vision for the future. And they are not emotionally charged. They're empirical. They are something that you look at objectively. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? If you become emotionally invested in all your goals, you're going to live a very unhappy life, a very stressful life, because, what do you do when you hit a goal? You're like, okay, great. What's next? Like, there's a moment of joy. So if you're on the way to your goal and you're all tense, I got to hit this guy, you live your life miserable. So what you want to do is look at your goals empirically as these signposts and not emotionally charged. Your emotional attachment is to your vision for the future. Where do you see yourself and why does it matter to you?
Now, I'm wondering, you've got so many things going on these days, and one of the things is this new podcast that you've started. Tell us more about what that is and what your goals, if you will, are with that.
So I've been threatening to do a podcast for years. I'm late to the party, I think, right? But my son, my son is in business with me now, and he's younger. He's 22. And he said, Dad, you got to do this, right? And I had a fabulous time when you guys were there. I've spent the last 10 years being interviewed by everybody else. Mm-hmm. And, I have an exciting story to tell, right? And for me, I looked at a podcast as a way to use my celebrity to bring in really cool people. I can get the people that a lot of other people won't be able to get. I can bring my viewers, the people that listen, I can bring them stories and strategies and insights they probably wouldn't otherwise have gotten because, everyone's busy. But I thought maybe that would be pretty cool because I'm well known and that would help me get really great people like you guys. I'm getting really important and people with a lot to offer. So I thought that was one great thing about it, that I could use my high profile to get great people and make that really interesting for the viewers. And why not make some money? Of course, you can make a little money, but that's not really what it's about. It's more of like, really raising the awareness, of my own brand, of course, because I'm moderating it, but also bringing in really great people that have great stories to tell and insights to share. That's one aspect. The second aspect is I think that for my particular business, I need to divide it up. I'm feeling my way around it right now. Notice there's two types of people that I bring on the podcast. So I'm trying to divide it out into like half of them are celebrity type of people and the other half are more like business type of people. You get it? So there's sort of two types of people. I'm going to try to do 2 podcasts a week for now, then up to 3. One of them will be more about just celebrity, really great stories, and the other will be more about business insight. That's my idea of it right now.
And one of the things that I thought was great about you, that I was really surprised for somebody who hasn't done this, that you listen so well to the people you're interviewing. And a lot of interviewers don't do that. But you seem to have a real natural gift for a real give and take conversation.
I think that it's one of the biggest misconceptions about sales. You can't be a great salesman if you're not a great listener. Mm-hmm. Every great salesperson is a great listener. I always say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. People, when they see little clips of me, they want to hear me talking. So they see the talking side because that's like what you want to learn, what I said, right? But actually, when I'm really selling to someone, I'm listening more than I'm talking. And when I finally do talk, I'm making sure that the words I say are relevant to that person based on what they said to me. You get it? I'm listening. And I think that it's something, it's a skill that I've developed at a very high level. Just thank you for that. I appreciate it. But it doesn't surprise me that someone would say that, because how could you be a great salesperson if you're not a good listener? I think that's just a little misconception about what a really good salesman does.
And Jordan, the question we ask everybody on our podcast, since it's called Nobody Told Me, what's your Nobody Told Me lesson? So in your case, what is it about life or sales or business or whatever, wherever you want to take it, that nobody told you and you wish that they had?
Nobody told me that when you meet the right woman in your life, everything makes more sense. I never really realized, I was never told that. It was always like, oh, yeah, she's hot, she's not. It's like I never realized that the right woman or the right partner, how instrumental that is to really live a fulfilling life. No one told me that.
I happen to totally agree with that. I think when you're with the right person, you become more successful in every facet of your life, and you genuinely see things differently, as corny as that sounds.
Yeah, and things fall into place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like no one ever really told me that. Like, happiness comes from within, not from someone else. But that being said, that the importance of like really being in a real give and take with someone else, a partner that you love and trust. Like, and no one ever told me that is really the highest level of happiness for me. And I think for many people, when you can really find someone, it's not sexual even, it's beyond sexual. I'm talking about, someone that you trust and can communicate with, and that that has your back, someone that you can trust. and a partner that you love. And of course, hey, you want to be attracted to someone. But I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. No one ever told that to me. And I guess my parents, they've been married for 60 years. But no one told me that.
Jordan, how can people connect with you and find out more about what you're up to on the internet, on social media?
On the podcast?
Podcast is The Wolf's Den, right? That's the name of the podcast, The Wolf's Den. And if you just go to jordanbelfort.com, you can find my website. Just Google my name and you'll see all about all the stuff. A lot of stuff's really cool out there. Really, a lot of great content out there. And I love having new people listen to my podcast. I think it's great. And also my website. So check it out. I think everyone will love it to really understand and to learn the importance of communication and at least to perfect it at a basic level, if nothing more.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to talk with you again. We loved being on your podcast, and we wish you tremendous success with it.
Thank you. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Our thanks to Jordan Belfort. Again, you can find out more about what he's up to at jordanbelfort.com. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
You're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thank you so much for joining us.